Hello, I'm Brittany Haskell, and I'm talking about the insanity defense plea and the competency to stand trial tests. These two tests of understanding from the defendants help determine guilt and when to administer harsher or lighter sentencings and restoration to have defendant at full capacity while on trial. I will go through in my presentation how these tests and defenses have been corrupted and reformed. The insanity defense, used roughly 1% in felony cases, have a 25 to 26% chance of the defense holding up in court. While the last time the insanity defense was reformed was in 1984 with the Insanity Defense Reform Act, or IDRA, the Insanity Defense Reform Act changed the rate of NGRI, or not guilty by reason of insanity, by narrowing the definition of insanity, raising the standard proof, and limiting expert testimony. They reimagined the standard proof with clear and convincing evidence and gave a new definition and getting rid of the old that focused on cognitive abilities of impulses, not of sound mind and temporary insanity. Well, the new definition focuses on eliminating irresistible impulse, requires mental condition to be severe, and whether or not the defendant had the physical and mental capacity to act out and understand and appreciate the crime they committed. The reform of the insanity defense came shortly after the acquittal of Hinckley, the man who attempted to assassinate President Ronald Reagan. By using the insanity plea, even though he showed signs of premeditation in his act of violence, it was dismissed by American Law Institute, or ALI, standard, which labeled him insane because his psychosis prevented him from understanding that what he did was wrong. So, why have some states abolished the defense? Following the case of Hinckley, Kansas v. Collar was another case that made some states consider abolishing the defense. As husband James, who was having an affair with a personal trainer, was caught, and wife took herself and kids to stay with her mother while drafting up divorce papers. But James went into a rage frenzy after the leaving. He went to his wife's mother's house where his wife and kids were staying and killed them. He tried to plead insane but failed when he didn't meet the requirements, as he was using the insanity defense as an easy way out. But cases like Kansas v. Collar and Hinckley were both very public displays of abusing the insanity defense. So by the power of many states, they sought to abolish it and to provide community protection. And providing mens rea and using mental illnesses to determine sentencing rather than guilt as alternatives for the insanity defense. So what are the implications of abolishing the insanity defense? By getting rid of it, the defense that helps protect the vulnerable to crime, like the mentally ill, has done more harm than good. Ever since the deinstitutionalization of mental hospitals starting in the 1950s, these patients, or those who would qualify to be admitted, have been dumped into prisons. As we can see with the trends on the graph here, as the 50s, we can see the subtle decline, and then in the 70s, it starts rising up for prisons, as in 2001, all-time low here, all-time high here for prisons. By putting these people in prison, doesn't help them or treat them in any way. It only causes more damage and more rearrests in these types of folks. Competency to stand trial, the CST test, was instituted to help ensure a fair trial to all defendants, and has become a common practice with 20% of defendants being found incompetent and therefore cannot stand trial. Although they are found not to be able to stand trial, these defendants are placed into restoration or a mental hospital where they are held for 30 to 40 days until they are found competent to stand trial and another day for a trial can be set. Although it is rare to have a defendant not be able to stand trial, as only 3.2% cannot attain competency, CST testing has found many ways to be reformed, the last being in 1960 after the ruling of Dusky v. U.S. The Dusky standard stated that the defendant must have a rational factual understanding of the proceedings and the ability to cooperate with counsel. We can see in one case where the CST tests had been misused. In the case of the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, his defense was trying to paint him as a mentally incompetent person. As Ted himself was a narcissist, he could not allow himself to be called incompetent, and set the record straight that he was able to stand trial, and in spite of the defense painting him as incompetent, he pled guilty to his crimes. So how are they different? Competency deals with the present ability to understand proceedings and assist in counsel, while insanity focuses on the past mental processes, understanding that was happening while committing the crime, and determining if the defendant should or shouldn't be held accountable. The insanity defense rarely occurs in cases, while CST is a common practice in most cases. And CST offers restoration periods and insanity is not. Although these tests and defenses serve different purposes, both provide standards on the defendant's understanding of what is asked of them in court, whether it be competency or mental state during a crime. And the citations that helped put this presentation together was Medlaw, Insanity, Making Law in the Absence of Evidence by N.J. Finkel. And some websites that help me out is pbs.org, justice.org, pubmed.org, pmc.gov, japl.org, and vienna psychologygrounds.com. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day.